Welcome back to the Steady Trade Podcast, everyone. I am Tim Bowen, back with Matt McCall. I almost forgot my name there, but we live in a very uncertain world. Like there's a lot of uncertainty going on in the world, and that segues well into our topic of today. You know, we have to act on, you know, probably the biggest piece of mind thing that maybe has ever happened in my lifetime. Very unique situation. So we're recording right after Biden declared that he's dropping out of the election. A lot of uncertainty right now. And one thing I would like to say, you know, before we get started is, you know, normally with the podcast, we kind of try and, you know, be very nonpartisan. But listen, there's probably going to be a lot of partisan stuff come out in this, because I think you can't talk about this situation and not pick a little bit of sides. So if you know, there's your trigger warning for this episode of the Steady Trade Podcast. But that being said, you know, and one more point I do want to make is, like, a lot of times, like sometimes when I'm doing some of my mentoring webinars and stuff, and I always, again, try and keep it very apolitical, but today we were talking politics, and the point I made to those people is I'm like, listen, markets move on emotion. Like a lot of people want to get too much into the fundamentals and technicals, but really the market is a representation of human emotion at the end of the day. And I don't think there is any more emotional topic than politics right now. So it's like, I feel like we have to talk about this. So that being said, welcome back, Matt. How's it going, my man?
Doing well. Thanks. I'm going to just say your disclaimer, same thing, apolitical. And I'm also going to put one more disclaimer out there, Tim, and that is, this topic's important because we're going to talk about now with Biden out, Trump still in, obviously, Harris in. Well, we think it's going to be Harris. And what that means for the markets and for us trading and us investing long term. I think we need to talk about that. That's a huge topic.
Yes.
But I will say one thing, that if you look back at Biden's years so far, you would think that oil and gas stocks would be doing terrible and renewable energy would be doing great. And it's the exact opposite. So as much as we say here, you have to be nimble. And I hate to say this too, because it's very important that the president is, but at the end of the day, does it really matter? It's all the people pulling the strings behind it. And majority of the time, they run on this very strong platform and rarely get a lot of it done. Even when Biden had control of everything for a while, didn't get everything done. So just take this with a grain of salt, I guess. We need to look in this because it is going to affect your portfolios, no doubt. But I wouldn't stop today after watching this and change your portfolio completely, because I think that's not prudent either. I told you a minute ago, I told producer Greg, on Friday, I'm actually at my father's house. I just got here this morning. I was in New York, Nashville, now here in Philadelphia. And I told him, I said on Friday, I said with text, I said, Biden drops out this weekend guaranteed. And he thought I'd submit inside information. I played off like I did, because all parents want to think he got a deal on something or something's hot, right? But I didn't know shit. But I did tell you, and this is going to sound conspiracy theory, and it's going to make me sound political, but it's not. Just looking at this, and we had just talked about this off air, Tim, when Biden came out after the disaster that was the debate, went on to do these live interviews, which were more of a disaster. Even his own party said it. So it's not just me saying this. And then suddenly gets COVID and put him away basically on a shelf for a few days while they figure out how to get him to drop out. And then suddenly that happens. So this to me is a really bad, funny circus movie that I want to turn off. But unfortunately, it's a country that's great and that we live in.
Yeah. And, you know, I just, you know, it's one of those things, like, longtime listeners know, like, you know, I'm people call me like Captain America. Like I always talk about, you know, I joke about, you know, history began on July 4th, 1776. Everything before that was a mistake. But, you know, like, I'm a huge believer in the founding fathers and a huge believer in the idea of America. But even if it was my candidate, you know, my president, like, the way this went down, it just, it really is very discouraging to think about the fact that, you know, forced out this way, you know, and I know a lot of people on social media are throwing around coup and all this stuff, but, like, I just feel like this wasn't his decision. Like he was basically forced by his party to make a decision. And to me, that isn't what, you know, that's not the way it's supposed to go down. And I would say that if it was my guy, as they say, forced out by his party, and all of this, like, games and political dirtiness just because they want to win at any cost. And, like, you know, what about the 350 million Americans you're supposed to be representing? Are you making these choices because you care about them, or you want to keep your job or your position or your or get your, you know, your kickbacks back to your lobbyists, etc. And it really it is a bummer that it went down like the way it went down.
I agree, and I think no matter where you land, most people might feel the same way. So, I'm a numbers guy, so the numbers obviously changed on the election, the odds right after this happened. When Biden came out, he didn't endorse Harris right away. It took him about 25 minutes to figure out how to put a tweet out. He finally did and endorsed her, or had pressure.
I still want to know if he actually has the login to that Twitter account.
Yeah, I don't think so. But so the odds now for Harris being the VP are 1-9. So basically locked in. The next best odds are Michelle Obama and Newsom at 15-1. So the betting markets, which that's real money being bet on it, is saying basically Harris is going to be running for president against Donald Trump. That being said, if you look at the general election, Trump is still a -200 favorite, which means he still has a pretty big favorite. Predict It, which is a site a lot of people look at, Trump went from a 64% chance to beat Biden to a 60% chance, where Harris went from 27% chance to 40. So still 60-40, still a bit higher. What I found is fascinating, Tim, since 1860s, when they really kind of started predicting, obviously back then the polls are much different than they are now, the favorite has won every general presidential election in the United States except for two. One was the most recent. Most recent one was 2016 when Trump obviously upset Hillary Clinton. Another was in 46 when Truman beat Dewey. And that was a huge upset. And there's huge headlines, all that stuff. They thought Dewey won, but Truman ended up winning. So it's kind of crazy that it's only happened twice and Trump is the favorite now. I mean, I don't know who wins this. A lot can happen in the next, 100 plus days or so. But I think the markets will look at this as not a certainty. Is the reason I brought up those numbers. They don't see it as a certainty. I think a lot can happen between now and early November that we're going to see increased volatility. And we already saw the VIX, the CBOE volatility index, at the highest level since April on Friday as the markets pulled back from an all-time high. So I'd love to get your view of is this going to be good for you in short-term trading, creating more volatility for the penny stocks and low price?
Well, right now it appears so. Like the last couple days, and today included. I mean, we had in low price, low float stock land, we had from Friday today, SERV. That's this little robotics company. They make food delivery robots. NVIDIA took a stake in them. Went from 2 to 13 in basically 2 days. It's still near the highs. And then today we had MIRA, another low float stock, up over 400%, and CMAX just hit 300%, like in the time we went live. So right now, and we've been seeing the headlines with small caps, they're on fire. I mean, we had another robotics play, RR, that basically doubled from Friday to today. So right now, it kind of seems like, and that's what we like about penny stocks and small cap stocks, is a lot of times they just disconnect from reality. But this was something I've been predicting. We did our kind of small cap story, podcast there a few weeks ago. Yep. And as of right now, penny stocks seem to love it. Like this is, we always go through peaks and valleys, but the last few days since since the assassination attempt, which we haven't talked about, which will probably come into this podcast, I thought everything would kind of grind to a stop because people would be so fixated on the story and the media and stuff. But last week in small cap land was incredible. And then it's continued into today. So at this point, all I can do is look at what's happening real time, and small caps seem to love this. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue past today, but right now the penny stock market's crazy hot.
Yeah. And, a lot of people would say that the small caps are they'll benefit from a Trump victory based off kind of the more America First type of platform that he's running on. Because as we know, a lot of small caps, they're smaller companies, $1 billion or less, a lot of them. They're not big exporters, so they're not worried about international markets. They get a larger majority of their sales within the borders of the United States. So if there's more of America First type of platform that a president runs on, typically you will see small caps do a little bit better. So that's we made a list here of kind of a Trump victory, what that would look like. And I think, Tim, what we could do is in a further show, once we find out really what Harris stands for, I don't know if anybody really knows, kind of what
good question
the platform is. I don't think anybody really knows yet. She didn't say much in 3.5 years.
Yeah. And again, that's, I chuckled, but I don't chuckle from a partisan standpoint. I don't know if the record is there to again, even if, she's your candidate. I don't know if you can find the data to actually see what her platform is, today as we're recording,
I will say there's one sector that Trump usually, when talk about Trump potential victory, comes up all the time, and that's energy. And when I say energy, I mean fossil fuels. He, in his acceptance speech, I think it was last Thursday at the RNC, he quote unquote said, "Drill, baby, drill, and close our borders." So obviously he's out there saying it. And if that's the case, he's also for less regulation, right, in a lot of different sectors. And I think that affects energy, and I think it affects banking, we should talk about in a second, but it really does affect energy. And I think what will do well is oil and gas, especially the big names, the ExxonMobils, that type of stuff. I think they'll actually be huge beneficiaries. And coal. Coal stocks have actually been doing pretty damn well over the last couple of years anyway, which is really hard to fathom what you think, with Biden. But there's an ETF. There used to be an ETF that tracked coal stocks. It went belly up, was a Van Eck. But another one was launched in January. Symbol is COAL, COAL. And you can see it bottomed in March at 22, right up to 26. It's since pulled back the last week or so, but that is an area that coal stocks could do very well, I believe, because outside the United States, India and China burn a ton of coal, and they're not stopping anytime soon because they have to. They're growing economies, not as much as U.S., but I don't think that slows down. I think coal will continue, and some of these coal stocks, Tim, are so damn cheap that they're tough to ignore.
Yeah, and just jumping back to the oil and gas, so like back to small cap land, I've actually got a go-to watch list of I think there's 65 of these oil and gas penny stocks. There's a ton of them, and IMPP is one, INDO is one, and these have been stocks like when through the Trump years they've just exploded. Like I believe it was INDO like in 3 days went from like 2 to 40, and it was all because of like the headlines in the big oil and gas stocks. So I love it. Like those. This oil and gas list, I go back to it for years. We've been reusing these because what happens when the big names pop off, that's what we love in small cap land, is there's these repeat names. Husa, there's all these names that I remember that are consistent runners. And like that would be, I could see like very soon post-election, if he's coming out saying drill, baby, drill, like these small cap oil stocks would blow, like explode. Yeah. So we'd like to have many times. Yeah.
And less regulation too, right? More ability to drill and not be regulated as much. That lowers costs, which a lot of these small companies have pretty thin margins. So that's important to them. So you get the regulations. He's also talks about tax cuts. Who knows how that plays out for individuals or for corporations, but he has specifically talked about tax cut for corporations, which again, that to me benefits smaller companies because the large multinationals have the best accountants and the best people in the world to read through the stacks and stacks of pages of the IRS code, where the smaller ones don't. Let's be real. They don't have that money. They don't have a room or a floor full of accountants trying to save every penny. So that does help the smaller names as well. And this all goes together. Lower taxes, less regulation. Boy, oh boy, that is a perfect setup. And America First, throw that in there. For small caps. It really, really is. Not every small cap. I'm not saying everyone goes up, but it really does set it up for that. But let's flip and do something negative real quick about the potential Trump presidency before we go into more positive, Tim. And that is trade policy and tariffs.
Yeah.
That could hurt things. We saw it last week with Taiwan Semi, TSM, which is one of my top 5 long-term holds in the world right now. I freaking love this company. But Trump came out and said basically Taiwan, there are issues with China. They should be paying us to protect them. And I don't have a view on that, honestly. I'm not quite sure what to even say about that. But what Trump, and I'm sure he knows this, or at least his administration knows it. I saw these great stats that came from Barron's on Taiwan Semi on the plane this morning. And it said that Taiwan Semi makes 92% of the world's advanced semiconductors with transistors and components smaller than 10 nanometers. 92%. Korea makes up the other 8%. Where does that leave the U.S.? Nowhere. They want to try to get to 20% in the U.S. by 2030, which at some point we should do a show just on that because there's obviously opportunity. If we do get 20% advanced chip manufacturing in the United States, it's going to be great. And Taiwan Semi is actually constructing a huge facility here in the United States. So that may account for it, but it's still a Taiwanese company. Taiwan Semi, without them, NVIDIA falls apart. Apple, you can't make an iPhone without Taiwan Semi.
Well,
Like,
you can't make
dude,
anything. Yeah. I mean,
anything.
it's like,
Yeah.
you look back to like, like the great example was like, and I'm sure many will remember this, like back during the pandemic when there was the semiconductor shortage and like they were, I remember seeing the pictures of like all these car lots with like thousands and thousands of cars that they couldn't ship because they couldn't get semiconductors, and I had a buddy that like got a Cadillac, like an Escalade, and the heated seats didn't even work. He had to take it back like 6 months later to put the chip in to make the heated seats work. And it was like, and you just think about how that cascades through literally everything, with the semiconductors.
So, I mean, that's something we need to keep an eye on. I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot because, with the small caps, a lot of them are technology or innovation related. So that's going to have play off that. From my standpoint, as long-term investing, almost every type of innovation I see out there right now, whether it's AI and biotech to self-driving cars to flying cars, you name it, all need chips. So this is something we need to keep a very close eye on. And, we all know Trump by now. He comes in strong and then negotiates down. So this made me...
Art of the deal.
Yeah, exactly. We had to be making a bigger deal out of this deal, right? But one thing that Trump has talked about that has been bullish to a sector has been cryptos.
Yep.
And that's just in the last couple of months, right? And you and I have talked about this in the past. And JD Vance, he's actually been more bullish and been on with cryptos even longer. He's been kind of backing it. Trump's speaking on the 27th in Nashville. I just arrived from Nashville this morning. But I am going to be flying back to Nashville for this conference because I want to be there and listen to him speak. Because I got to tell you, I don't know what he's going to say to him, but it's going to be him, Michael Saylor, Kathy Wood, all the big names, right? What comes out of that conference, this is an enormous conference, that could push Bitcoin back above 70,000 or close to it now, possibly to a new all-time high, and start this next kind of cycle higher, which could push it to 100,000, in my opinion, Bitcoin, and bring up the altcoins with it. This could be a pivotal weekend for Bitcoins, for everybody out there. This is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I tell you, kind of going back to predictions, because that's kind of the idea of this episode, like, if that is the one, like if I had to put out of all the kind of topics we're discussing here, if I had to put money, which I am on Bitcoin, into like if you had to pick one though, if you're like, okay, Tim, here's 6 different industries, 6 different sectors, ideas, crypto would be the one that I'd be like, that's the one that will benefit the most in my opinion. Now we'll see from a Trump presidency, because I think, listen, flat out, we all know he's a populist. Okay, we all know that stuff, and we all know that the crypto people are as much a true believers as they get. And I think it's just like that would be the one. If I had to pick one thing out of oil and energy and semis, and we're going to talk EVs and banking and all these things, if you force me to pick one, that's where I would push the chips in on is crypto.
And I think it has the biggest upside of everything too. I think, with or without Trump, I think there's huge upside with a Trump administration or anybody. It could be John Doe administration that truly backs Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining here, using cryptos, blockchain more for our country, being the leader in that technology. I don't care who it is. That's going to be great for the entire sector. So I agree with you. I think the upside potential is absolutely enormous. We did talk about kind of America First a minute ago, and I still believe that's probably one of the biggest themes outside of crypto that I think that will be pushed through a Trump administration. And that leads me to manufacturing. And early on in his administration, his first administration, manufacturing stocks did very well. He talked about reshoring, onshoring, basically meaning bringing back manufacturing to the United States. We're seeing that already. If you take a look at, break down GDP and look at numbers, you see where spending is on manufacturing in this country. It's booming in the last couple of years. And that started with Trump, and it continued through the Biden administration as well. But, you think manufacturing, Tim, you think, well, dirty, old, factories. But the manufacturing of the future is a lot of stuff we've talked about in the show. And that's robotics, it's automation, and it's artificial intelligence. Because any new manufacturing plant's going to have all 3 of those things in there. And I'm actually going in 2 weeks or so to an undisclosed location in the South to go see these robots that are basically, unbelievable what they're building, and going to go do some videos there. But I think anything to do with manufacturing here in the United States gets people behind it on both sides. Also, what a play on technology. because it's
Right.
all going to be great technology that gets built with these new plants.
And flat out, it's kind of like, yeah, I think most of the viewers know. I mean, I lived in Michigan my whole life. I've seen the downfall of Detroit, and it's like it's an emotional thing for me, and a patriotic thing at the end. Like I've many times said that, like, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and find all of these offshoring guys and string them up, man, because like to me that was the worst idea. To try and move all this manufacturing overseas just to save 10 cents a part or whatever was like one of the worst things to, especially, and again, you kind of grew up in the Midwest area too. And then, like, just what has happened to, the Rust Belt, et cetera. And the idea of bringing all this manufacturing back to, again, in my opinion, and we probably have, foreign, people in other countries, but the greatest country and the greatest innovator and the greatest manufacturer of all time. So it's like, I just love it because, like, I want the country to do well at the end of the day. And the way you do well is you produce for the world. And we used to do that. And then somebody at some, class somewhere decided that it was a great idea to move all this stuff offshore. And I think it's been proven universally wrong. I mean, in some instances it was right. But I just love the idea of bringing it home,
So, another, I think, area we need to talk about, you mentioned this a moment ago, Tim, is EVs, electric vehicles. And, kind of with that, let's throw renewables in there as well, just kind of that whole kind of greener, cleaner energy. When it comes to EVs, obviously, Trump has talked about potentially 100% tax on EV products and parts that come over from China. I don't think that's doable because it would completely destroy a lot of companies that bring parts from China. But the question is, if he does take away some of the subsidies, which I think he'll do that for buying EVs, and EVs have struggled a little bit in the last 12, 18 months or so. They just haven't been as popular. Range hasn't been as good, all that kind of stuff. It's not getting to where it needs to be as quickly as I thought. But the wild card here is somebody that we've talked about a lot, a company we've talked about a lot, is Elon Musk and Tesla. Elon Musk is writing enormous checks to Donald Trump right now on a weekly basis, according to Trump. So I don't think he'd be doing that if he thought Trump would come in and destroy the largest EV manufacturer in the world. So how do you see this playing out?
Well, again, I think that, I think that, and Trump's been very clear that, he's a fan of Elon Musk. And, my position has always been that right now, I think there's Tesla and everybody else. So I think that, I just look at, the difference between a Tesla and like a General Motors, EV. It's not even the same thing, in my opinion. And I just think that obviously any of these, if they're, they don't have the benefit of subsidies and stuff like that, I just think more and more people will gravitate to Tesla. And like, I still think that it's inevitable. I think that, we've seen it slow down. I still think the change to the EVs is completely inevitable, but I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be Tesla is the big winner. And then it's going to be somebody else. Like someone else is going to come along and be the second best EV. I just don't think it's any of these old line guys. Like, I just look at, again, General Motors, like, they can't even make a good gas car 120 years later. How are they going to make an EV? And they depend on subsidies, and they depend on the government handouts and the bailouts and all of this stuff to just stay in business. And that's where I think Elon will just absolutely crush all of them, and will, 70% of the cars on the road will be Teslas, in my opinion.
And the stocks held up very, very well in the face of a lot of negativity from Wall Street and other areas. Again, inevitable, but slowing EV sales a bit. And I was just in Nashville, and I saw several Cybertrucks in a few days I was there walking around, which kind of blew my mind. And did you realize that last quarter, the Cybertruck actually outsold the F-150 Lightning, the Ford, that was kind of supposed to change their business? And a Cybertruck actually outsold it already.
I didn't know that. I did not know that, but I'm not surprised.
But to do it that quick, I was surprised, right? Because I'm like, that fast already? I know they had production issues and are only making so many, but that says something. And, this isn't a topic of the show, but two other companies that are publicly traded now that people thought may have rivaled Tesla in the future. Rivian's one of them, RIVN, and Polestar is the other one, PSNY. I ran into them all in Nashville in Green Hills, and they have a Polestar sitting there with a little thing where you take a look at it inside the mall. And that kind of caught my eye that it was there. Saw a couple of Rivians driving around. Polestar stock has just gone straight down trading. I mean, it's down to 82 cents now. Rivian was down around $8. It's back up to 17. It's more than doubled in the last 3 months. So maybe they're making a comeback. We'll see what happens with that. But that's a company that could get out there. I mean, it's more trucks and SUVs, but one you may want to keep an eye on at this level down here.
I tell you, that is, and again, I lean bearish on Rivian. I just don't think they can hang with Tesla. But full disclosure, and everyone knows I'm a huge Elon fanboy. I got tweets from 12 years ago saying Elon was going to change the world. Okay. But I just see a lot of Rivians. I mean, I would say when it comes to I see way more Rivians out there than I see F-150 Lightnings. I'll tell you that much. So
exactly. And then you look at just kind of, I guess, one more area you could take a look at is the regional banks, which historically do very well in a high interest rate environment, right? Because the higher the interest rates are, the larger their margins, because they make most of their money by obviously bringing in bank deposits and loaning it out, and they make that spread. And when interest rates are low, the spread's low. Interest rates are higher, it's higher. However, remember when Silicon Valley and everything blew up back then, they really haven't recovered from that level at that point. But you're starting to see them move a little bit, the regional banks. There's the IAT, which is the iShares Regional Banks, and went sideways from December through July, and it, boom, went to a new year high just in the last couple of weeks. I mean, on a chart basis, it's a nice breakout over the last 12 months. So maybe they're going to start coming back, and maybe interest rates aren't the big thing that are moving them here. And interest rates, again, will stay elevated for some time. It's not like the Fed's going to come in and slash them back to zero. So that's an area because Trump will have less regulations on these small guys, and I think there'll be more M&A activities, more big ones coming in, buying, expanding, which will make it, again, less regulation there. So regional banks might be an area that sounds super boring, but the charts are telling me they're breaking out. And if you look at IAT, the volume that's coming in that ETF for the last 2 weeks is insane.
Yeah, and that is one, again, from small cap space. We typically don't really look at those as just because they don't move enough. They don't move, 100, 200, 300%. But I do agree with the idea for sure, like the idea of these smaller banks. But, for me, whenever we look at any of these lower price banks, we automatically skip over them because it's they just don't move enough, unfortunately.
And most of them don't have a lot of liquidity too,
Fannie
right?
Mae and Freddie Mac, story. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been very day tradable over the years, but yeah.
And that was my last topic was Fannie and Freddie. Thanks for setting it up. It is, they could be privatized under Trump, which I think would be good for the stock, but those low priced, I've never traded them personally because I just don't understand the value of them, the movie in the long term. Obviously, for you, you're looking for the action. Have you watched them at all lately?
Lately, they haven't done anything. But what's kind of funny with Fannie and Freddie, over the years, when the story is right, they become huge runners. There's been several times that they've exploded. Now you got to day trade them because typically what happens is the crowd rushes in because it's that idea. In penny stock land, we call them former runners. When the story heats up, people gravitate to specific names, and those are always the two names. Now, the last, it's probably been 2 years since they've done anything, but when that story heats up, and that's why I brought it up, because I want people to remember that they do go. There's been many times they've doubled in a few days and been very day tradable, but I would never hold them because typically what happens is the crowd rushes in and the crowd rushes back out. So,
it's tough to get out of that theater when everybody else fired and you're not the first one. It's not a good place to be. I mean, that's basically what I have. I'll give you my last thoughts and you can take it home, Tim. I think this is a very important topic that we're going to touch on probably many more times between now and the election, maybe even after, depending on who the winner is, just to kind of for your portfolio. But again, the caveat here is don't rush out and change your portfolio based on what the odds are of who's going to become president based off that. I mean, the president's powerful, but they're not that powerful when it comes to the stock market. The stock market still goes up close to 75% of the time. It's going to move higher. Use pullbacks to buy into, and anything crazy that moves the market down is probably a great time to buy. One thing I would say for my personal portfolio, if I think Trump's going to win, I may take 5 or 10% of it, put it into some stocks or ETFs that I think will benefit from that, just to kind of diversify my portfolio. But again, you don't want to be putting all your eggs in one basket because who the hell knows when November comes around who will win, number one. Number two, you don't know the reaction the market's going to give you. So you're pure gambling if you're trying to do that.
Yeah, and my again, the way if we continue the way it's looking, and again, Trump remains in the lead, like, again, I'm buying more Bitcoin, because I think that, kind of going back to what I said before, if I had to pick one out of all of these, 6 potential, beneficiaries that we talked about, that one, I think, the Bitcoin market, the crypto market would love him, and I think he will play off it at the end of the day, and basically, talk about crypto like that, etc. And, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these things are driven by emotion, and the more you hear him talking about it, and he remains the favorite, I just think that that's the best one, in my opinion. Like if it stays the way it is, I'm buying more Bitcoin every week. So
I'm with you.
So listen, people love this on podcasts, man. What's your prediction? Yeah. What do you, based on the day we're recording, the week of, July 22nd, what's your call, man?
I think Trump wins. I think, and again, that's not my political view one way or the other. I'm not saying it could be not. I'm not telling anybody what it is. But I do think Trump wins the election. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to get super freaking ugly between now and then.
That's the bummer. That's what I don't like.
Yeah. And I don't want to be negative. I'm a pretty damn positive guy, but I'm realistic too, right? I have to be realistic. I think it gets ugly, and I think that a lot of, on both sides. Again, I think both sides of the aisle is going to get 100%. Freaking ugly. They're each going to call either one or be, you're rooting to democracy. I don't think both sides are doing that. But again, at the end of the day, Tim, I think we're a democracy, and whoever wins, and I support the president, and I support my country. So, but I think if I had to put money on it right now, I would take Trump at minus 200 to win $100 to win here.
Yeah. Again, if like putting it that way from a stock market perspective or an odds favorite, I'm there too. Barring some sort of I don't know who they get, but barring some sort of rock star candidate, I think that Trump wins. And and again, I mean, no president is perfect, no politician is perfect, but. So that being said, everyone, thank you. Thank you again. We love all the comments we're getting, and hey, drop us a prediction in the comments. Let us know. Go on the line like Matt and I just did. And remember, we gave the disclaimers at the beginning. At the end of the day, Matt and I are the same. We want what's best for the country. I want what's best for 350 million people, particularly, the 340 million average people out there. That's why we do this podcast, is we want to help, again, the average Joe. And that's what I want. Like whoever it is, if it's best for most of the people in the country, especially people that are struggling or can't get over the hump, that's what I want. That's what I care about. I care about the United States of America in the end, and I want all of the people to do the best. So hopefully we didn't offend any of you. But that being said, have a great day, everyone, and we will see you on the next episode of the Steady Trade Podcast.